a debt of gratitude for staying with us through turbulent tides, for providing insights, for offering criticisms, and for reminding us that our collective goal is not comfort in divergence, but progress in convergence. Whatever our differences, we are bound by the same destination, the duty we owe our people. That is why I'm honored to share the glory of this day with you. The theme of this summit, Building a Prosperous and Inclusive Nigeria by 2030, breathes life into our development agenda. For a nation as abundantly endowed as ours, with immense natural resources and a population blessed with skills and ambition, our greatest asset lies in planning for the future. We are aware of the obstacles before us. We are aware of our economic inequality, insecurity, and infrastructural deficits. But we must also acknowledge that there is no shortcut out of this dilemma. Our task, the task of reform, is to set the course and continue with the changes that will define the Nigeria of tomorrow. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our renewed hope agenda is not just the outcome of consultations with experts and citizens. It was inspired by our determination to move beyond rhetorics and confront the obstacles that have long restrained this nation's vast potential. The bold reforms we have undertaken speak for themselves. You, as experts in wealth creation, are the fairest judges of their impact. Wherever you stand, there is a resounding consensus that our reforms have stabilized our macroeconomic environment, with our economy expanding to $372.8 billion in 2024, up from $309.5 trillion in 2023. Our total revenue collection also rose from 19.9 trillion naira in 2023 to 25.2 trillion naira in 2024. And as of August, it has reached 27.8 trillion naira, surpassing the revenue target of 18.32 trillion naira. These triumphs and projections are guided by the promise we have made to the nation to grow Nigeria's debt service to revenue ratio from 97%, where we met it, to a sustainable level. Aside from the good news that this ratio has now reduced to less than 50%, I am proud to share that this performance in our early days in office inspired Fitch to upgrade Nigeria's sovereign rating to B with a stable outlook, and Moody's to lift our issuer rating to B3 with a stable outlook. Both praise our improved economic foresight and clearer policy direction as their barometers. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the reforms championed by the present administration have begun to yield tangible results across sectors and beyond the GDP growth of 4.23% recorded in September 2025. A number which surpasses projections from multilateral agencies and local think tanks. Non-oil revenues increased by 411% year-on-year in the same month, while the tax to GDP ratio now nudges towards 13.5%, up from barely 7% a few years ago. Our debt to GDP ratio now stands at 38.8%, far below the limit set by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 60%, and those of ECOWAS and World Bank at 70%. These numbers tell the story of a nation prepared for the present. They represent the promise we made to Nigeria. We came to office fully aware that the secret to a successful federation lies in empowering each federating unit with the resources and autonomy to pursue development peculiar to its needs. This is why we increased the state's monthly allocations, giving them room to fund critical projects and social interventions. Simultaneously, our commitment to redeeming our industrial and infrastructural deficits has enhanced productivity across sectors. We are now producing an average of 1.8 million barrels of oil per day and are working towards achieving 2 million barrels per day by the end of the 2025 fiscal year. As experts in the economy, you know more than the average citizen that the stability in our foreign exchange market is not accidental. It reflects deliberate choices guided by the same economic logic and wisdom that gatherings such as these embody. Along with subsidy removal, these decisions have rescued our public finances, stabilized the economy, and reassured investors at home and abroad. We owe this progress to the sacrifices of Nigerians, whose patience and understanding have been the bedrock of our endurance. To them, I say, the better days we promise are already within sight. Through these reforms, our external reserves have grown to $43 billion as of September 2025. The figure we had when we assumed the mantle of leadership was so frighteningly low that I can't even dare to quote. Our trade balance also improved to 7.46 trillion naira in the second quarter of 2025, up from 5.17 trillion in the first quarter. I admit that this growth has not yet fully translated into enough jobs for our people, but we are closing that gap. We are giving priority to agriculture and solid minerals, two sectors with great potential to create jobs and strengthen our economy. To move faster, we have entered into partnerships with other countries to bring in modern farming equipment, train our farmers, and expand extension services across the nation. Agriculture is the bedrock of our economy. And for us to have enhanced agricultural output, we have to embrace technology. Improved seed is absolutely essential. Fertilization is a sine qua non. Extension services is an ingredient for successful agricultural intervention, and most importantly, better agricultural practices. And we are poised to see that the whole mantra is on increase in yield as lightly enunciated by the vice chairman of the NESG. And we cannot have improved yields without embracing technology, modernity, fertilization, and of course, technology. Not complex technologies where a family of 3 or 4 can farm 2,000, 5,000 hectares, but intermediate technology that also employ labor and drive productivity. And our reforms are deliberately cross-cultural because we understand that diversification is the only pathway to sustainable growth. The contribution of the Ministry of Solid Minerals Development to the Federation account has improved remarkably with the sector, generating 12.58 billion in 2024 through mineral title applications and related fees. This is a sign of the sector's awakening and the result of deliberate reforms aimed at unlocking its full potential. As a people-oriented government, our priority remains restoring hope to the unemployed, the poor, the excluded, and the vulnerable. We have created pathways for young Nigerians to access grants and loans and equity investments of up to $100,000 to scale their enterprises, innovate, and build sustainable livelihoods. We established a 200 billion naira intervention fund to support micro, small, and medium enterprises and manufacturers, helping them overcome structural challenges and enhance competitiveness. Our expansion of digital microloan access has improved financial inclusion, empowering small businesses and stimulating community-level productivity. These efforts underline our commitment to an economy that works for all Nigerians. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the 4 tax reform acts recently signed into law, the Nigeria Tax Act, the Nigeria Tax Administration Act, the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Act, and the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act, represents a bold recalibration of our fiscal architecture. They will boost domestic revenue mobilization, reduce dependence on oil, and simplify compliance. These reforms protect low-income earners, ensure fairness in corporate taxation, and strengthen digital innovation in tax administration. By promoting transparency and coordination among all tiers of government, we are laying the foundation for a fairer and more prosperous Nigeria. To improve connectivity and ease of movement, we are constructing highways, bridges, and rail lines across states, including interstate terminals, with over 440 ongoing road projects covering more than 2,700 kilometers of superhighways nationwide. These investments in infrastructure are the arteries of national prosperity, facilitating commerce and strengthening national unity. The government has also unveiled the renewed Hope Ward-Based Development Program, a people-centered initiative designed to empower citizens at the grassroots. By targeting all 8,809 wards across the 774 local government areas, the program seeks to map local economic activities, human capital, infrastructure, and resource endowment, ensuring no community is left behind. Modeled after successful frameworks in China, India, and Kenya, it represents a bottom-up approach to addressing multidimensional poverty through participatory development. Community leaders, residents, and ward representatives will identify local priorities that feed into local government, state, and national plans to ensure alignment and sustainability. To realize these noble goals, subnational governments must play an active role. At the federal level, our commitment remains unshaken. We continue.
All right, thank you so much there for staying with us. Well, like I said earlier, before the Vice President left, he made a confirmation and told everyone in this room that government will continue to work with the private sector players to make sure they grow this economy inclusively. And of course, the role of women in this, it remains also very, very important. And I have right with me here to discuss that. She's Ngova Imbe Nwankwo. She's an executive director at NESG and also a WIMBIS trustees. I tried not to murder her name. Thank you so much, and it's really good to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thanks for not murdering my name. You did a great job.
Thank you very much. NESG 31, 31 years of this. First, I want to start with the role of women in, economic building and, and all the discourse in here. What do you make of it? I see real participation of women at this gathering.
I know, it's quite exciting. I've been coming to NESG for a few years, but this is, I think, one of the ones that you can actively see and feel female participation. And when you talk about the role of women, it really cannot be overemphasized. Women make up slightly more than half of the population, and if you use the analogy of a plane, you cannot have an aircraft flying with only one engine or half of its engines working. For us to really be able to take off and sustain the flight, you need to have the aircraft flying with all its engines, and that's what we talk about when we say inclusivity and bringing women on board. We need to have women actively participating because they bring in really specific flavor. So one of the things that we see and is widely documented is the fact that when you have a more diverse board, because we're talking about women on boards now, you get a lot more innovation because they're bringing diverse perspectives. You also bring in, when we look at sort of ESG, the S part of it, a real focus on ensuring that you have engagement, a focus on sustainability, a focus on long-term profits, and less risk-taking. And then the sort of the third thing that we find that is also sort of widely documented about governance. When you bring women on board, you have that extra layer of additional governance. And I think when you put those three things together, you can clearly see that where women are actively part of boards or part of corporations or part of government, there is no way but up.
I think I would agree with you. My GCEO is also a woman, and I can see what's been happening to my company. But let's move away from that. Challenges come, and women will say funding. Sometimes we're not given the same level playing ground with men and all of that. Have you been able to battle with that? You're an executive director. You're also a trustee member of WIMBIS. I'm sure you've heard lots of stories. How's it been?
So there have been challenges, and there continue to be challenges. Some of the things that come to mind for me are we're not as intentional with including women. So we talk about inclusivity, but it's important to note, and I always say that it's not a war, it's not a gender war. Both men and women bring real interesting parts to the whole. And so what's then critical is, for women, it's understanding what are the things that limit them from either being able to enter the workforce or to stay in the workforce, and then being intentional about creating solutions that allow them to thrive, right? In addition to that, there's also the fact that often women are brought in as a token, as opposed to bringing them in to really provide the fullness of themselves. And so it's not about just ticking a box. It's about bringing women in and including them in all aspects of the business, so that, like I said earlier, you get that full complement of both sides. So, I mean, with that said, do I think that we're seeing some positive changes? We are. At WIMBIZ has, over the years, we've done a number of things to make women part of the workforce, to identify the areas that they need support in, identify areas that companies can do better to keep women in their jobs. And we're seeing real engagement from the private sector, from the public sector, and today we have our own WIMBIZ panel at NESG. So that tells you how much work WIMBIZ has done over the years.
You really have to run up to meet up with that session. And I must thank you so much for spending your time. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right then. So you've heard it from her that Ngova Embe Nwankwo, she's a trustee with WIMBIZ and also executive director at NEBS, talking about the role of women in the mix. And I also agree with her that that's very important. So back to the speech of the Vice President. The Vice President reeled out some figures, and I would like to share with Nigerians here to listen to those figures according to Mr. Vice President earlier today. Now, he talked to us about the economy expanding. Now, in figures, now in Naira, Nigeria's economy has expanded to 372.8 trillion Naira. That's in 2024, up from about 309 trillion Naira in 2023. That's swift. Now, from revenue collection, it also rose from 19.9 trillion Naira. That's in the speech of the Vice President in 2023 to 25.2 trillion Naira in 2024. As at August of 2025, that's the figure now. It also had reached 27.8 trillion. That's also still increasing by the day, surpassing the revenue target of 18.32 trillion. You will recall that a few months ago, President Bola Tinubu came out to say clearly that government has raised enough revenue, talking about from the non-oil space. And when you look at the figures gotten from the non-oil space and you look at our budget for the year, you will know that that is almost half of it already gotten from the non-oil space. So if we are to generate money from crude oil sales, proceeds from crude oil, and of course solid mineral sector, which is also doing very well for Nigeria's economy now. Nigeria is getting to a point of being independent, talking about borrowings and all of that. Moving forward in that same speech, you would also see that debt to service ratio, which was about 97% at a particular time, now it has reduced to less than 50%. That is also highly commendable. At a point, Nigeria was almost servicing debt with its entire revenue, but with all of the efforts being made by this administration, and as we see in these figures, and also figures coming from international parties, not just Nigeria, from International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank, they all agree to the fact that things are really changing. They're taking a turn from what it used to be. And these are the issues being discussed in this room, like I said earlier. These are the issues being put forward. These are the figures being analyzed, and everyone is getting to understand that if the country continues at this trajectory, what would happen in another 6 to 8 months? We should see a total revival of Nigeria's economy. More into that speech, Nigeria's sovereign ratings, which was B and a stable outlook, and Moody's lifted, it was at B3, and now to a stable outlook, both praised by improved economic foresight and clearer policy direction by government. Now, $1 trillion economy, I mentioned that earlier, and we know that about 14 banks at the moment have met up with the recapitalization exercise of the Central Bank of Nigeria. According to financial experts also in this room, they say that is a message to tell you that Nigeria's banking sector remains very stable. And when the banking sector of an economy is stable, of course, there should be economic growth. Now the central bank has gradually started to ease rates from 27.5% to 27%. If that pace continues, lending rates would reduce. And once lending rate reduces, people will be able to get funding. Manufacturers will be able to get funding. Local players will be able to get funding. And exporters, all the building made in Nigerian products will be made easier. So are people saying at this room, they believe that government must stay the course? I remember exactly 12 months ago when we gathered in this same room, the speaker from the IMF said Nigeria must stay the course of these reforms. There must be no going back with regards to it. So looking at it, the conversations will continue, like I said, different segments, and we'll continue to cover from here, bring you up to speed with all of the happenings from here in Abuja, where the NESG 31 is happening. So from Abuja, I will say thank you so much for being a part of Business Nigeria. We'll see you again tomorrow, where we'll be bringing you up to speed with live happenings from NES 31.